Game over. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 126 for July 16th, 2015. I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Thanks for joining us this week, everybody. We have a really fun, small-size show for you this week. But before we get into any of that, Brendan, we're recording this a little earlier than we normally do, but how was your week, man?
It's not small, I'll tell you that.
No, it was a big week.
It's a big week. Oh, I'll tell you, man, I'm doing pretty well. You know, the sun is shining. I mean, and for those of us that live in Kentucky at 10 p.m. at night, that's actually not very abnormal to say in the summer that the sun is still... Sure. I was driving home at like 9:20 after seeing this movie, and it was still kind of light outside.
Right.
This is what I love about being in this zone of the country.
Yeah.
It's
and it wasn't raining for
That's
once.
what I was going to say. It wasn't raining.
Yeah, seriously, it wasn't raining either. And
yeah, absolutely. And of course, that voice you heard in the background was our lovely guest this week. It's been a little while, but Jonathan Berry once again is joining us. Thanks for joining us, man.
I am so glad to be back with you guys.
Yeah.
I love this show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So
I appreciate it, man.
I'm glad that you're here. I know we talked, we tried to get you on for Avengers early on in the year, but scheduling didn't work out.
Yeah.
So I figured Ant-Man was the next best choice.
Was Guardians the last time I was
I
on
think
the show?
so, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm
It's
becoming
Guardians
the
was.
superhero guy.
No, exactly.
And we had our bonus content that episode where we ranked all 10 of those Marvel Cinematic Universe films as well. That was a long show. That was
It was
good
long.
show.
It was good.
Right.
Yeah, that was fun. So I'm glad that you're here, man.
I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. Of course, as I just alluded to, we are going to be discussing Ant-Man, starring the one and only Paul Rudd. And going off of that, we're going to be discussing our top 3 Paul Rudd performances or characters. And for our discussion segment this week, we're going to be doing something unique where we're going to be recapping Marvel's Phase 2 essentially and kind of slapping a grade on that, kind of going off of our grade of the month segment. But instead of recapping the month, we're just going to recap Marvel Phase 2 because why not? Sounds like fun.
Ant-Man is the close of Phase 2. And this,
I loved your reasoning for that. When it was me that actually came up with the idea, it's like, you know what? Why not?
Yeah, exactly. So, and as Jonathan just said, of course, it's the final film in Marvel's Phase 2 as well. So it makes a lot of sense. And I look forward to getting into it.
And it's just a great week to be talking about this stuff. I mean, last weekend was Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of entertainment news out of there. So, I mean, it's just of course, Marvel didn't have the largest presence. They're waiting till, later.
That D23
the new
conference
Disney
or whatever.
conference, right. But still, this should be a lot of fun.
It absolutely should be. And I guess kind of going off of that for our bonus content this week, we are going to be doing another edition of Nerdin' Out with DJ Valentine, where we will be talking about some of the stuff to come out of Comic-Con, which should be a lot of fun as well. I know DJ's got a lot of interesting thoughts about some of that stuff, so I really look forward to getting into that this weekend as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that later on in the week. Well, guys, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Let's get into it.
And here we go.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 126. Brendan, in the right hands, the relationship between man and suit is symbiotic.
Yeah, that's why it worked for Barney Stinson.
In the right hands, the relationship between man and suit is symbiotic. The suit has power. The man harnesses that power. You need to be skillful, agile, and above all, you need to be fast. You should be able to shrink and grow on a dime, so your size always suits your needs. Now dive through the keyhole, Scott. You charge big, you dive small, then you emerge big.
All right, Ant-Man is directed by Peyton Reed and stars Paul Rudd, Michael Douglas, Evangeline Lilly, Corey Stoll, and a few other people that we'll get into. Let's toss it to the man himself, Mr. Jonathan Barry. What did you think about Ant-Man?
I loved it. I would say this is probably I would say this is probably the most family-friendly superhero movie yet. I'd put this up there with The Incredibles on just like family fun.
Yeah. All right. What about you, Brendan?
I can see that comparison, to The Incredibles. I think I feel like it was trying to go for that a little bit. It definitely had that family-friendly vibe. I think it reminded me a lot of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, coincidentally.
Sure.
Which I think there's definitely an influence there.
Definitely.
Because it is kind of taking off some of those like classic 80s tropes of like really corny sci-fi films kind of built around this heist film. And somehow even going through production troubles by, losing Edgar Wright, as everyone's familiar with the story, or if he left. I don't know the full story. I think it was more of the latter. But they get this guy, Peyton Reed, in here, whose filmography includes Yes Man, Bring It On, and what was it, The Breakup, I think was the other one. But regardless, you look at that resume, and he comes in to tackle a movie within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It seems like he understood it. He really did. I had a lot of fun with this movie. I don't think it's perfect. I do think some of the other reviews I've seen where people are really raving about it, I do think it is getting to the point where it might be slightly overhyped, because I do think this is another tale of two halves for me, JD. And we talked a lot about that kind of thing, so to speak, in some of our extra films last year. I do think a lot of parts in the first half of this film, it gets really bogged down in too much exposition, I thought, and it's very dully told. I got bored during most parts of the exposition and some of the training sequences, but the second half of this film is spectacular. The second half of this film is basically one long giant climax. I mean, it basically goes until the very end of the film, and it's spectacular. It's well balanced. It's got laughs. It's got heart. It's got everything that I was hoping for. And it may be some of the best stuff that this MCU has turned out just within that second half. So while the first half does hinder me from loving it as much as I would have liked, the movie is worth seeing just for where it ends up going, and it is spectacular by that point.
Yeah, I'm going to be right with you guys and make it 3 for 3. I really like this film a lot too, and I'm going to be a lot higher than you, Brendan, because I will disagree, although I completely understand where you're coming from with the exposition, but I actually quite enjoyed the exposition because I think it gave the film a lot of heart, and it gave it a backbone that carried itself all the way through, that I really enjoyed. Those themes and tropes of family I thought were really well handled. I think the only parts of it that was a little awkward, I would say, it didn't necessarily take me out of the movie, but it was a little awkward, was some of those scenes that the Scott Lang character has with his buddies, Lewis and Kurt and Dave, I think was the other character's name.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I mean, those were some of the funny parts. Though.
I agree.
I think they peppered the humor throughout the exposition, as Brendan calls it, just the introduction of everything.
Sure. And later on in the movie, I really quite enjoyed their roles in the story. I just think that some of their parts in the exposition scenes I thought was just a little awkward. But in general, I do agree with you, Jonathan. It's something that I also very much enjoyed. And as you're talking about, Brendan, once we get to the climax and it seems like it goes on forever, all those action beats was awesome. I love the training sequences too. I love how we got to know different kinds of ants and how that fit into this world and how he was able to use them. All of that was fascinating. Yes. And the crazy thing is, when they announced this project, like, that was a lot of my apprehension, was like, I just don't like the whole idea of ants doesn't excite me. I don't know much about this character to begin with. And knowing that Edgar Wright was attached, that got me excited. And then he left, and then I was like, screw this movie, I don't care. But once I saw the trailer, I was like, Okay, I think I'm on board. And then after seeing it, I loved it. And this is, I don't know exactly where this ranks in my Marvel filmography, I guess, but I will say it's up there. I really, really love this movie.
Definitely better than Thor 2.
Well, I know I like Thor 2 more than you did, but I would agree with you. It's definitely better than Thor 2. Sure. But, one thing that we can talk about kind of going off of that, because I know we discussed the last time you were on, Jonathan, how sometimes the Marvel villains aren't necessarily the best. And I think we can all agree that the bad guy in Thor 2 is probably one of the worst. But what did you guys think about the Darren Cross character? I don't think he's not a Loki or a Winter Soldier, but I think he's far better than some of the other villains we've seen.
I would agree with that. I've been saying this for a while. Marvel really hasn't done villains right.
Yeah,
outside
sure.
of Loki, the best thing they've got going is their, Vincent D'Onofrio and the Netflix Daredevil.
Sure.
I keep hoping that will cross over into a film somewhere. But yeah, they really haven't got villains right. Now, the thing is, the Yellow Jacket character and this character really isn't grounded in the comics. So this was something really kind of created for the movie.
Nice.
And I thought it was done rather well. I just wish there'd been a little bit more. Corey Stoll was pretty compelling. I wish there'd been more of him.
And I feel like that's the motif with Marvel villains in general. Let's get more of them. We need more of them.
But on the whole, he was I thought he was more interesting than Ronan and Guardians, or
I agree. Yeah,
pretty much everyone else they've thrown at us.
Yeah, and I thought he looked pretty badass once he got in the suit too. So
right.
What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, I Marvel needs to get a handle on it's developing their villains. They're able, every single one of their villains at this point, they've been well cast, they've been well acted, they've just never been fleshed out well enough. And I think if you take out Loki, if you take out the Winter Soldier, and heck, if you take out even Alexander Pierce, Robert Redford from the Winter Soldier, who I also actually love as a villain, I think Corey Stoll as Yellow Jacket is the best villain of this entire MCU, and that even includes Ultron. I liked him better than Ultron.
Oh yes, I agree.
And that's really, and I will agree, he's probably most comparable to what Jeff Bridges did as Obadiah Stane in Iron Man. It's almost, the characters are very similar, at least from a motivational standpoint.
Right.
But the thing is, and maybe I'm biased, but I just absolutely love Corey Stoll as an actor.
I like him too,
I don't know if you guys have been watching House of Cards. I'm still behind on that show, but he's in season 1, and he was far and away my favorite character from that season.
Right.
And mostly just because this guy's a good actor. And Jonathan, I agree with you. He's incredibly compelling for what he has to do. I just wish they would have done more with it. But because he is so compelling, he has a bit of a slight edge from being just slightly above average in what they're normally used to churning out. I think there's at least there's a motivation to him that I can kind of understand. I just wouldn't, the past relationship that he has with Hank Pym, played by Michael Douglas, I think was very interesting. We just needed more of that. But he was very good in it.
Well, that's for what little screen time he had, he made the most of every time he was on screen.
And that's a challenge to do.
And it's a little ironic to me that you've got these iconic characters that Marvel's given us in the Red Skull and Ronin and Ultron, and I think mostly they're pretty darn forgettable. And then you pretty much make up Yellow Jacket, as a villain, and wow, this is pretty awesome, you know?
I completely agree, and I think one of the things you said, Brendan, that really works and resonates is you at least have an understanding. And like you said, Jonathan, he takes advantage of the screen time when he is there, and I think that's enough for this to work, because they do focus a lot on the Scott Lang character and his background and his relationship with his family, and of course how he runs into Hank Pym as well. Like, there's a lot of time spent there, and I think we needed to. I know that's something I've argued with these Marvel movies in general, is that they're fun and they focus a lot on the hero and their journey, and that I like. But in terms of exploring these villains and making them fleshed out, we just don't get enough of that. But at least here, there's enough of an understanding. We know why he feels the way that he feels, and so while it's not, a Joker from the Dark Knight, it's still better than a lot of the other things we've seen.
Right.
Well, let's get into some of the action. What did you think about the action, them going from big to small? What do you think, Jonathan?
I really enjoyed it. And now this was one I saw in 3D, and I really loved some of the effects in 3D. I would say this end battle, like Brendan was saying, the whole second half of the movie, you know, from the heist point, but especially the end battle was just about the most satisfying end battle Marvel's given us yet. Like, I was really complaining after Age of Ultron that all Marvel fights are starting to feel the same. And this didn't. It was fresh. It was new. It was different. The stakes were his daughter. I mean, it wasn't the world's going to be destroyed, you know. I mean, it was so much more fun, and it was hilarious. I don't think I've laughed that much in an action, you know. It was it was great.
I love the irony of that, of the stakes are high for Scott Lang, but for the world, it's not necessarily this huge world-ending event quite yet.
Right. Sure, he didn't want to get, you know, the technology in the wrong hands. That was the ultimate goal of the heist. But I mean, ultimately, it was about his daughter and protecting and saving his daughter.
Yeah, which is really great when the idea of the Avengers does come out, and Hank Pym's like, "We're not quite there yet."
Right.
Like, hold your horses. I love that, Brendan. What do you think?
Nah, Jonathan, you hit the nail on the head, man. I think it's these fight sequences, I think, are the reason why Edgar Wright still has a story or a screenplay partial credit for him, because I think a lot of these were where his vision was, and I think that I'm glad that they kind of retained some of that, because, and this is not a negative by saying it feels like, because a lot of these fight sequences do feel kind of Edgar Wright-esque, if you want to say that. It did remind me of stylistic tropes that I've seen in maybe a film like Scott Pilgrim versus the World. There's definitely some similarities in the filmmaking there, but somehow Peyton Reed's able to come in and still make it feel like it is of a piece with everything else that's going on, because he still has his own stamp to put on it, and it doesn't feel jarring, which I was very worried about going into this film, and it doesn't feel that way. But the fight sequences themselves, aside from what I said about them blending in with the world of this film and feeling of that piece, they're so freaking entertaining. They're just so weird and so
they were
different.
Fun.
And,
they were just a lot
I think
of fun.
the reason why I think this film really does benefit from seeing it in 3D is because it's very CGI heavy. It really gets very CGI heavy, that I think seeing it in 2D would actually hide some of that magic. Because when you see a movie in 3D, one of the biggest complaints is that it darkens the light palette. But I think doing that for this movie is actually a benefit, because it's able to hide any potential maybe bad CGI that could be there that I didn't get a chance to see. So seeing it in 3D made it look more, I guess I want to say visceral, which is almost a strange word to use with a film like Ant-Man. But it did. I felt like I was really when he first shrinks into that bathtub, I thought I was really in the tub.
And when they turned the water on, the water looked so cool in 3D. It was awesome.
It does.
Yeah, and I would agree. The 3D is amazing when he's going from big to small. They do a really good job of utilizing that. And, you know, speaking of some of the shots in this film, Brendan, you were bringing up Edgar Wright, and I very much noticed that too. A lot of the gags, especially used within the action, when we cut to, you know, like the scene they show in the trailer where the train
Thomas
falls
the Train.
down. Like, I
Thomas
love
the
that,
Train.
and that is such an Edgar Wright thing. You see that in his movies all the time, and I think they did a really good job of that, and not just those kinds of camera gags that they use for humor, but just the dialogue and the comedic timing of things. I think that's another reason why Peyton Reed was chosen for this. Now, I haven't loved necessarily his movies, but him coming from a comic background at least helps with that comedic timing. And when you got someone like Paul Rudd in there, he knows how to handle those moments as well. And they do a really good job. So the dialogue in those moments, along with the action and the visual effects that you're talking about, Brennan, it all came together for what was really refreshing. And like Jonathan said, just a ton of fun. I was grinning ear to ear the entire time. It was just amazing. So
now, I had heard that Paul Rudd actually gets a writing credit. And
he does. He and Adam McKay.
Right. That he had a lot to do with kind of just tweaking the script and adding a lot of the humorous beats. And so I was real entertained by that as well.
Yeah, and you can tell because when we get to our top 3 later in the show and we start discussing Paul Rudd, a lot of those great characters that Paul Rudd has portrayed, especially in maybe Judd Apatow films, I think a lot of those jokes in those films are kind of done on the fly.
Right.
So
Sure.
he brings his own
Yeah.
specific
The
persona
improv
to it.
style.
And in this
Right.
movie,
Yep.
it's very much Paul Rudd. He's not playing a different character. It's very
Yeah.
much the Paul Rudd we know and love.
Yeah.
And you know what? All the better for it because it worked for it then. And I think that's where,
Yeah.
or that's why he essentially gets that writing credit because he's really essentially doing a lot of what we already know and love from the guy. But in my opinion, that's not a criticism. That's a good thing, and it works for this world, and it makes the humor just great.
It's exactly what Robert Downey Jr. did for Iron Man.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
and that's why we love Iron Man so much. It's just an extension of Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
being himself on screen,
Yeah.
you know? And that's what's great about this too, is if you like Paul Rudd, you're going to love Ant-Man because it's
Yeah.
Paul Rudd in a superhero costume
Yeah.
in a really ridiculous situation. Just, you know.
No, I completely agree. And it's not just his comedic timing that he brings to the table, too, but I think it's part of the reason why I like those exposition scenes, too, that you didn't, Brendan, because I feel like he adds some layers to that and he brings some heart to it. And I love that. I completely ate up all those scenes. I thought they were handled well. And I think part of it was Paul Rudd's performance.
And I'll have more to say about those maybe in final thoughts, but like I will agree that the actors, especially Paul Rudd, they do the best that they can during those exposition scenes. Just those exposition scenes, at least like the training sequences in particular, that's where it felt like it was out of a different film. And I think it's mostly the dialogue that was written for them because it felt like it was so I guess lifeless, and I think a film that really was this vibrant and it gets this vibrant and energetic by the second half. I think it needed more of that vibrancy. I started drifting a little bit during those moments. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with the characters or the performances, especially from Paul Rudd. It's the writing.
I think I kind of agree with you, Brendan, because there was a feeling of something's missing and I couldn't put my finger on it.
It was uninspired.
It did feel that way. Like it was like I was enjoying the humorous beats. There wasn't anything that I could put my finger on to say was off, but it didn't feel like it had its stride. It didn't feel natural to me.
Yeah.
Like I would say Guardians felt. Guardians from the opening credit, you knew, and it felt that tone throughout the whole movie. So
Yes.
this did not have that. I will agree with you there. That it did and I think that's where they were getting into. Marvel's established itself and you've got somewhat grounded in reality, and now you're dealing with something completely outside of reality, and shrinking and talking to ants. And so there was even that little bit of like, I wish they would have explained more on talking to ants and how this actually works, So there was either that like, okay, and yet I don't want you to explain too much more because move the plot along. And so I think that was the hard part was the how do we balance, giving the story, giving the character depth of Henry Pym and the Pym particles and Corey Stoll and his daughter Hope and then Scott, and balance all these character stories and then the science of it all and the background, because I mean obviously they're tying Henry Pym all the way back to Tony Stark's father and the old Shield and Haley Atwell's Peggy Agent Carter, so it was like there had all this depth in there, which I loved that, but it did feel it just didn't feel completely natural, and it really wasn't until like you say, once the heist really got going, that the movie felt like it had its tone was right.
Yeah, see, I can't quite go there with you guys on that one. I do agree that the first act doesn't quite have the same energy as the second and third acts, but when you're talking about those training sequences and them talking to the ants and learning that, I thought there was plenty of scenes in that. I mean, it happened 3 or 4 or 5 different times where he was trying to figure that out among all the other stuff happening in those training sequences. And while some of the first act doesn't quite have the same shtick to it as the rest of the film, I think it does have a little bit of a backbone. And like I said, I think it has heart to it that works for the film. For me, the biggest thing that was missing in that first act was some of the comedic stride hadn't quite hit yet, and I felt like some of those supporting characters with Michael Pena and T.I. was a little flat to begin with. I think it got much better as the film went along, but those scenes to me didn't really quite work. And I thought everything with like Bobby Cannavale's character was really great. Judy Greer doesn't really do much. Judy Greer doesn't do much, but I felt like everything with the Paxton character was really good. So, I mean, I think there was a lot still working for that first act, even if it didn't quite have the same energy. And then when we get to the exposition and we're seeing more from the Hank Pym character and his relationship with his daughter Hope, I thought was really great. There was a really nice cathartic moment between the two of them that I thought was beautifully interrupted by the Scott Lang
was
character.
A great
that
moment.
was fantastically well handled. So for me, a lot of that stuff was working so fluidly in this movie.
And from your comic dork perspective, the whole referencing Janet Van Dyne, referencing the Wasp, referencing his wife.
Yeah.
The comic nerd inside me was geeking out big time.
Oh,
in that
I'm
moment.
sure.
So
Sure. And I knew of the character, so I was sort of feeling that. I'm not quite on the same level as you, but I understood that was a Marvel character, and so they're talking about it and introducing her to a degree. So I thought that was pretty neat the way they did that.
I loved how they had that supposed footage of Ant-Man in World War II or maybe Vietnam. I have no clue what footage that was, but it was great to show that he has history. He has been around, because from the comic nerd's perspective, we've come to understand now that movies take liberties with our characters that we've grown up and loved. But, people are always like, Ant-Man, what the heck is this? And I'm like, originally, Ant-Man was one of the original Avengers.
Yeah.
Ant-Man and Wasp were in the picture way before Black Widow and Hawkeye,
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it was great to see that they were referencing the history. And
and I love the connection that Ant-Man has to the Avengers, which I won't spoil.
That was fun.
There is
a lot of fun.
another Avenger character that kind of shows up, and I won't say who, but I was completely blindsided by that. I don't know how you guys feel, because I didn't read any reviews. I had essentially stayed away from a lot of the talk on Twitter.
Spoilers,
So
right.
I had stayed away from it. So I was completely unaware that was going to happen. So when it happened,
It was so much fun.
Yeah, I loved it. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Completely agree, and it didn't feel shoehorned in, which is another thing I was going to be worried about with something as awkward as a film like Ant-Man, how they're going to try and wheel it into the MCU specifically, and it didn't feel shoehorned. It felt pretty natural, and kind of going off of something that you guys were just talking about, but those World War II scenes where you see like the little ant that's kind of jeopardizing all these missions like that.
Right.
I think it's stuff like that. I think are the reasons why I didn't like the exposition scenes later on, because though I love those scenes, don't get me wrong, where you're seeing those past World War II scenes, but the film just needed, I think, in those moments of exposition, it needed more weirdness, and I think that's why my favorite moments were the scenes where they were learning about the ant mythology specifically. Those are my favorite parts, and I think those scenes just needed more weirdness. It felt so conventional, and I was kind of disappointed by that. And I think a lot of the humor between Hank Pym and then his daughter specifically, I think, were very forced. But
I
that's
completely disagree.
I'm with JD on this.
I didn't like any of the humor that the three of them were going through. I think once the team got rabbled in before the heist, that's when the humor started working for me. But before that, I was hardly laughing at all. Which is but that's just me.
Well,
That's
see,
just
and
me.
I will disagree with JD on Michael Pena's character,
No,
because
don't
he
get me
had
right.
me
I think he was
laughing
great.
from the beginning. I mean, from the moment he was on screen,
Fair enough.
I was like,
Me too.
Here's sort of like was it Kat Dennings in Thor? It's the kind of stealing the show. Hilarious.
No, and I agree with you. I think he's great. He wasn't my problem. I just think in some of those scenes in the first act, and I think it was more with the Kurt and Dave characters, like they would cut and they would have these awkward jokes, and it kind of lingered on them a little too long. And those jokes I felt were a little flat, so it made the scenes a little awkward. It wasn't Michael Pena. I agree. He was
terrific
great from
He was
beginning to
hilarious.
end.
Yes, he
I think it
was.
was just how some of those scenes were handled in the beginning, and they did get much, much better later on in the movie.
Right. Well, and I'll say this: there was feeling like those first the first act, second act, as we're kind of talking about, before the heist got going, I remember thinking something's missing. Like they're now in the training mode. He's learning to use the suit and how to shrink and talk to ants and everything. And I was like, something's missing. And right about that time, they took us to this really heartfelt moment. I think it's Scott Lang, he's hanging out in bed and you can just tell he's thinking of his daughter, and then it kind of goes to his daughter. And I'm like, that was what I needed. That was some heart, that was some emotion. And I get there was a little bit of that missing in the first part.
One thing I want to ask you guys before we get to final thoughts is, and you just touched on this, Jonathan, with the idea of the heist, because a lot of this revolves around this giant heist as they're trying to figure out the Yellow Jacket character. And a lot of people have been talking about how Marvel has kind of shifted their focus lately with these other genre films, right? With Guardians was a space opera first, and Winter Soldier was a 70s spy thriller first, and all that sort of stuff. Did you guys get a sense of that here? Was it as much a heist movie as it was a superhero movie?
Not at all. Absolutely not. I felt like this was a superhero movie through and through. And that's not a criticism. I just think the heist angle it didn't even feel like it was actually a heist movie. So if they said that this was trying to be a heist movie, I don't think they succeeded then, because it did not really feel like a heist movie. It kind of felt more like how you, for example, the invasion of Cyberdyne in Terminator 2. It just felt like something like that within a traditional action film. It's not a bad thing. It isn't. I just don't think it's a heist film. But what we got is still miraculously entertaining. But I don't feel like it was a heist film. It was more of a superhero film for me.
I think it had moments of the heist film with following the different characters as they're all making their way, all trying to get set in the right place. And it had the moments. I wish it had more. This movie could have been 30 minutes longer and I would have been happy. Just
in fact, I felt more of an influence to, like I mentioned, cheesy 80s sci-fi films with giant bugs and giant monsters invading a city and things like that. I can't think of any specific examples, but you kind of know those kind of movies I might be talking about. But that's what it reminded me more of. If it put anything ahead of being a superhero film, it would have been something like that. But I mean, it had heist elements, but I definitely don't see it as a heist film.
No, I mean, I'd heard comparisons to the Ocean's movies and things, and I'm like, no, it's not.
No way.
Not at all.
No
but
way.
I can see where they were trying to go there. I just wish they'd done a better job of that. If you're looking for a heist film, if you're looking for a superhero movie, you've got it. But if you're looking for a heist film, this isn't.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle of you guys. I think I'm more on the heist aspects than you are, Brendan, because I feel like a lot of the plot is predicated on breaking Scott Lang out because he is this guy that, can steal things and break into places. And so that's a lot of the reasons he's chosen. And then a lot of the plot near the end of the film is, again, it's all leading up to him doing this heist, but of course with his aunts and all that sort of stuff. So I think it was a nice blend of that and, of course, the superhero genre itself. And I probably felt more that than the 80s references you're talking about, Brendan. But what I like about it is the heist aspects eventually just comes to a complete halt altogether. And we get that final climax of the movie with those ending sequences, which was more superhero than anything else. And that was very entertaining. So I like the elements. I like how a lot of the film was predicated on the heist, but eventually it just takes this shift into superhero land, which was still a lot of fun and really well executed.
And there I will agree with you.
And it has that great psychedelic ending.
It does. Yes. It takes a page out of Interstellar, but much better.
Right. I was totally thinking that. I was are we
because
going
it doesn't
into a
say what the heck's
wormhole
going
now?
on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
No, but JD, what I was just going to say quickly is there I will agree with you that from a plot standpoint and on the surface, there's definitely a heist film here. Okay, but aesthetically, tangibly, from a filmmaking standpoint, I don't think it's there. But I think from the way the story is structured, it is structured definitely like a traditional heist film. I agree with you, but for me, that's just on the surface. Within what the movie is being, and from how the film feels itself, not there. But that's not a bad thing. What it is, I think it's a superhero film first. I think, and you know what? It's a good one. It's a good one.
I will slightly disagree, but I see your point. But for the sake of time, let's move on a little bit. Let's toss it to you first, Jonathan, for final thoughts and grades. So any other final thoughts on what grade would you give Ant-Man?
Yes, I do have a final thought because we have not talked about one of the best parts of the entire movie, and that is Evangeline Lilly. I'm a huge fan of hers ever since she was Kate on Lost, so I will still refer to her as Kate. But Marvel has not done a great job with the women in their films. I mean,
until now.
Well, you're right. Exactly. I mean, yes, Black Widow has been great, and I do love Pepper, and the Iron Man movies.
Yeah.
But
I like Gamora, but I think we'll have more of her that will learn to like her even more.
Right. But Marvel's been heavily criticized on why isn't there more female superheroes? Why isn't there female action stars in your movies? And man, they got the casting right on this one.
Casting was awesome.
They did her right. She just was a great character, a compelling character, and I cannot wait to see where they go with her.
Yeah, me too.
It got me really excited. Plus, I think she's I think she's just a talented actress. The emotional scenes, I think she pulls off legitimately and not.
I agree.
They don't feel forced.
What grade would you give Ant-Man?
Okay. I think I would give Ant-Man a B+. Okay. I think that's what I'd give Ant-Man.
Okay. What about you, Brendan?
So first, I'll completely agree about Evangeline Lilly. I mean, I love her too, and plus, for a single guy like myself, I just can't help but find her absolutely gorgeous.
I would totally agree. I'm a married man, and I find her absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, and to think she was my age when she first started on Lost, and that's a shocker. But
crazy.
she's fantastic, and it's finally great to see them give us a great woman character right off the bat like this. Because Black Widow's great, and a lot of the other women characters in this saga that we've talked about are great, but they've had multiple films to develop that arc to get to that point. Here we've got a great film. We got a great woman character, and it's from the first movie that she appears in.
Right, and I mean they didn't use Natalie Portman in the Thor movies well at all. I'm like, you've got Natalie Portman, and you cannot seem to give her something worth her talent.
Yeah.
So I was happy that they gave Evangeline Lilly a character worth her acting ability.
Could not agree with you more. That's perfectly well said. So so overall though, from a grade standpoint, I really did enjoy this film, despite the first half, or at least moments of the first half being where it was a bit bogged down in exposition. I felt it got a bit uninspired for a film with this kind of vibrancy that I think it needed a bit more of that vibrancy, and it felt like it was slightly missing that. But that's a minor thing. Just one other thing, I just realized this, and I think we do have to mention, because a lot of people have been talking about this, and it's been getting kind of hyped, that there are 2 post-credit scenes with Ant-Man. And I don't know what you guys thought about them, but I'm just going to come right out and say it. They're lame. I thought they were absolutely lame. And I don't know why they're getting so hyped up, because they gave us 2 scenes with 2 things that I already knew were going to happen. And it didn't get me excited for anything, because I kind of already knew about it already for some. And I didn't read any reviews or anything like that. They didn't do anything for me. And I don't understand why they're getting so hyped up with just these 2 post-credit scenes. People are saying, oh, even if the movie's not good, you got to see it just for these 2 scenes. In my opinion, no, I don't agree with that. But that's just my opinion. It doesn't hurt the movie. I'm just addressing something because I don't agree with that hype. But from the film itself, I absolutely agree with you, Jonathan. I would give this a B+. I think as far as ranking it within the MCU thus far, it'd probably be at the very least very close to making the top 5 for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right up there. If not in the top 5, it's knocking on the door.
Yeah, sure.
That's where I agree with. I do like it better than Avengers: Age of Ultron as well.
I agree.
For throwing that out there too.
I'm right there with you guys. In fact, I think I'm a little bit higher. I will just echo your guys' thoughts on Evangeline Lilly. I think she's absolutely wonderful in this film as well. I love the heart that she portrays, especially those scenes with her dad were absolutely wonderful to me. I think of all the cast, I think the casting was amazing.
Right.
The head scratcher to me is T.I., and not that he's terrible in the movie. I just think it's funny to think that T.I. is in a Marvel movie.
He actually had some funny parts. He did.
Yeah, he did.
I laughed.
I agree. No, it's just funny to think about him in this universe. But What are you going to do? But the casting is wonderful. I
Right.
love all the casting. I like the exposition a lot more than you, Brennan. As I mentioned, I thought all of that was great. It gave a nice backbone to the film for me. I love the relationship that Paul Rudd has with his daughter. Even though we don't see a lot of it, we do feel it. And we feel the relationship, like I said, between Hank Pym and Hope. I love that. And I think that's why that first end credit scene absolutely works for me, unlike it did for you, Brennan. Even though you may have known that was coming, absolutely, I loved it. I thought it was a great setup to what we're going to see next, and hopefully we do see more of that character in the future, and I'm sure that we will. As far as the final end credit scene, I can kind of see where you're coming from, Brendan. I didn't hate it. I actually quite liked what was happening. It was just not what I hoped that I was going to see.
Right. I think we all, well, I mean, I had hoped to see Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And we all know, Marvel is going to have
Sure.
Spider-Man come play in the Marvel universe. So that's what I was hoping, that something was going to be leading or tying to Spider-Man.
Well, I didn't even expect to see Spider-Man. And this
I didn't expect to see
keep in
him.
mind, I'm not criticizing it from what I wanted it to be versus anything else. It's just, the point of a post-credit scene, I think, is to tease something that either you didn't know was coming, or to get you hyped up for something that you didn't know you needed to get hyped up for. And these two post-credit scenes gave me two things that I knew were essentially going to happen. I guess, imagine like if we got our first teaser trailer for Captain America Civil War as the final end credit scene, because that's what they did at the end of Captain America First Avenger. They gave us the first teaser trailer for the Avengers.
Right.
I thought something like that would have been cool.
Well, I will say I loved them both. I loved the first post-credit scene.
I loved it too.
Because it just, it felt so honoring to the fandom and the comic nerds out there who want
and where they're
this
going
character,
forward with that character is going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting.
And they're just, I geeked out with that first scene.
Me too.
Now the second scene, I'd like to watch it over again, because I think they were giving some plot to
maybe
the
Civil War?
movie, that were implying, and I
may have.
I want to hear it again. I want to listen to every single word.
Pay attention.
Pause it frame by frame and analyze.
I mean, pretty much, yes. Now, was it what I hoped for? No, because I was really hoping for something Spider-Man. Did I enjoy it? Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, getting back to Ant-Man, though, I really enjoyed this. I laughed a lot. I thought all the stuff with Michael Pena was really funny. And speaking of Michael Pena, I wanted to bring him up again, too, because while we were talking about how this has some heist elements to it, and some people have compared it a little bit to Ocean's 11, there are some elements where it kind of feels like that, where he's kind of given some background on why they're doing these heists to begin with, which I thought was shot very similar to a movie like that, which I thought was really funny. I think, again, that's
those were great.
Those were
great
really
moments.
great. The one at the end, too.
Right. Very
so
funny. Very funny.
So good. I loved it. So it's that kind of stuff that I love. And so it has a great balance of heart and humor with great performances, fun action. I really enjoyed it. And I would agree with you, Brennan. I would say that I enjoyed this more than Avengers Age of Ultron as well. So I'm going to give this an A-. I think I liked it slightly higher than you guys.
I could see that. I could see that, yeah.
And if you want to read more of our thoughts, you can check out our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm.
And if you agree or disagree with our takes on Ant-Man, you can let us know by leaving a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/InSessionFilm or tweet us at InSessionFilm. You can also leave us a comment on Google+, and also email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. And also, if you hated this movie, you better learn how to shrink in size so we can't find you.
Exactly. So, all right, stay tuned. The InSession Film Top 3 is next, and we're going to be discussing our top 3 Paul Rudd performances.
Is it too late to change the name?
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Never could believe the things you do to me. I never could believe the way you are. Every day I bless the day that you got through to me. 'Cause baby, I believe that you're a star. Everyone's a winner, baby, that's
The InSession Film Top 3 is brought to you by the First Time Watchers podcast. And Brendan, of course, we just got done talking about Ant-Man. And I got to say, just like that movie, the First Time Watchers podcast, they may be small, but they also pack a mighty punch.
I wonder how they're going to take it that you just called them small.
Well, they're actually... Well, I don't know. I mean, they're big in my heart. How about that? They're huge in my heart.
That was gross. But they're absolutely big at heart and big at their knowledge of movies, which makes their show absolutely something you guys got to check out. And they're a great supporter of our show as well. It's hosted by Tim, Walter, and Hermano, and absolutely what's big is their knowledge of their films. They know it really well.
Absolutely, and their banter is so amazing. It's very entertaining, just like Ant-Man. So hilarious, so good. You got to check out that movie and the First Time Watchers podcast.
Yeah, and what's unique is that every week they'll pick a film that they've never seen before, watch it, and discuss it on their show to create this real fresh perspective. And they'll also discuss other movies that they've seen recently. They have a great yay or nay section that I love listening to. It's great fun. And they also talk about other trailers that have been released as well.
Yeah, and they also give some great movie recommendations at the end of the show that I would pay attention to. Hopefully they'll recommend Ant-Man to you as well. But overall, the show is very smart, and it's fluid. It's very easy to listen to, and you can just tell they have a lot of fun, which means you will have a lot of fun as well. So, Brendan, where can you find these guys on the internet?
There are a couple ways. You can go to firsttimewatchers.blogspot.com and also hit them up on Twitter at First Time Watchers, and also on Facebook. Just search for First Time Watchers. You'll find them right away.
And also go subscribe to them on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave them a review. I promise these guys are absolutely worth your time. That's the First Time Watchers.
Everyone's a winner, baby, that's true. That's the truth. Making love to you is such a thrill.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 126. Now we're going to be going over our top 3 favorite Paul Rudd performances / characters. I guess there's a little vagueness there, but wanted to throw a little wiggle room there to help out with our criteria. But speaking of that, do you guys have any criteria that you use to pick your list? We'll start with you, Jonathan.
I went by the 3 most memorable performances. So I'm actually breaking from movies, and I've got one from television in my list.
Okay.
And I think I know what one you're going to do from television.
Okay.
I'm not going to do that, but I think a lot of people would agree with you.
Yes.
How about you, JD?
I'm not going into the world of television either, but my criteria is very simply, I just looked at characters that just engaged me the most, the ones that I either had a lot of fun with, or the ones that I was able to think about, or something that just resonated about it for me, and I just kind of simply kept it there.
Yep, I'm in the exact same boat with you as you guys, and it sounds like you're leaning more on characters rather than performances.
Yes.
And I'm definitely more in agreement with that, because I think one of my favorite things about Paul Rudd is when he's able to make such a massive on-screen presence, even if it's in such a supporting role, especially. And I wanted to honor some of those maybe minor roles that he's able to make such a big presence, even though he doesn't have the biggest command of the movie, so to speak. But that's what I love about Paul Rudd, and I wanted to focus on things like that, as well as, most memorable and funniest, at tropes like that. So with that, let's talk about this wonderful actor. Jonathan, what do you have at number 3?
Number 3, it's so hard because this is one of his best characters is Danny in Role Models.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And it's probably, if I'm going on Paul Rudd movies, it's probably my favorite Paul Rudd movie. I find that movie absolutely hysterical.
It's very funny,
from beginning to end, and I find him twice as funny as why can't I think of his name right now?
Sean William Scott.
Yes. Now I also thought Jane Lynch was great in that, but yeah, I think he was hilarious. The scene in the Starbucks is just one of the best. I think anyone who's ever been to a Starbucks has felt that way before.
Congratulations, you're stupid in 3 languages.
And the whole Minotaur energy drink, I love that movie. Love it.
Yeah, I think Role Models is a very underrated film, because when you look at it, it holds a 6.9 on IMDb. This is a 7.0 at least, I think. I love this film, and it's always playing on TV, and I always have to watch it.
Oh,
I
gosh,
always
yes.
have to watch it.
Yeah.
But JD, how about what's your number 3, man?
Well, my number 3 was actually going to be just that. It was going to be Danny from Role Models, and I would agree with you, Jonathan. It's a really fun movie. I really enjoyed it a lot, but for my number 3, I changed it on my way home, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but my number 3, I am going with Ant-Man, because when you think about Paul Rudd and being in the Marvel Universe, it's kind of strange, but he makes it work, as we were talking about with what he does with the Scott Lang character. I love it. I love how they throw in these themes and these ideas of him being a poor father, and he's always away, and he's in jail, but his daughter sees him as being a hero, and he eventually learns that he has to become that. Now, he didn't think that he would do it by becoming Ant-Man, but the fact that he does, I think it just gives that film a lot of heart. And Paul Rudd, I think, is really engaging. I think he's great in the action sequences, but he's also got this comedic timing that is amazing all the way throughout. And I was glued to the screen a lot in that movie, and I thought he was terrific. So as the Ant-Man character, again, going back to the review, I wasn't hugely excited for this character or for this movie until I saw footage and what was happening, and I think the way that he just envelops that character, I loved, and now it's going to be in my top 5, maybe top 6 Marvel movies, and a big part of that is because of what Paul Rudd brings to the table here.
And the best part is that we get to see more. That now we get an Ant-Man who's gonna, a Paul Rudd who's gonna be playing off of Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man and all these other great Marvel characters. Like, I just can't wait to see Paul Rudd and Robert Downey Jr. together.
I agree.
That's gonna be great.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. I completely agree. Cannot wait to see him more in this universe.
Him with Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. I mean, I can't wait.
It's gonna be great. Yeah. So he just brings so much to this universe. So I'm also very excited. So that's why it makes my number 3.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it as well. I think I should probably reiterate as part of my criteria, I did purposely leave Ant-Man off just because we did get just off of talking about it. I wanted to talk about other things, and we do that a lot, JD. But I could definitely see your point. When I have more time to sit on it, it might come pretty close to my top 3. Mainly just maybe out of personal biasness myself because how much I love the MCU, and to see him a part of it now is just. It makes no sense, but it works. I mean, it totally on
works.
Paper, on paper, it's like, what the heck?
It's like a talking raccoon in a tree in a movie, but it works.
And
right.
This is why I trust Marvel most with their unknown properties now. I mean, that's another discussion for another time. We're on Paul right now.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. I feel you on that.
But that's why it's exciting, because you think about him going forward, and that's why I couldn't leave him off this list, Brendan, although I agree, and we do that a lot, but I had to include him here because my criteria was characters that has engaged me the most, and that's a top 3 character for me.
And that's absolutely fair, and I can absolutely agree with that. I understand. But continuing on, though, for my number 3, the one I'm going with here is kind of another one of his comedic characters. He definitely has a starring role in this film, and it's Peter Clavin from I Love You, Man. And the reason why I'm going with this one is because I find him, for me personally, this is a personal list, he's so relatable for me in this film because he's kind of socially awkward around in many situations, which I can kind of be sometimes, even though I can hide it sometimes. But he's someone that loves music. For a character that introduced the term "slap at the bass," I mean that deserves a number 3 spot on its own. But he loves the band Rush. I love the band Rush. And they're playing bass to Tom Sawyer. I've tried playing bass to that song before, not very successfully. But at the same time, this is a character that he's kind of like a Tom girl, I guess you can say. He's very, very much. He doesn't have a lot of guy friends. He has mostly female friends, and This is something I can kind of relate to. When I was growing up, most of my closest friends, even in college, were all female, and I can relate to this. So while it may not be his funniest character, and I think a lot of the great laughs almost come from Jason Segel more than anything else in this film, this is a character for some reason I can just relate to more, and for that reason, it makes me want to watch the film more often than some of the others. But that's, again, personal biasness. But because of that personal biasness, I really like the character of Peter Clavin.
I loved your explanation. It was great, especially to hear that you relate to him. Because my first thought was that character was so painfully awkward. Like it was so awkward.
I can tell.
Awkward,
And you needed.
The second I said his name, I was like, okay, I hear the dead silence. I better go into why. I got to go into why.
But you needed that character for Jason Sudeikis to play off of. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it was that's a great movie.
And the two
It's
of them were great together.
It's
Yeah.
a great character.
They have good chemistry. They really do. And I think a lot of it has to be, a lot of that has to go credit towards Paul Rudd just for what he brought to it. But yeah, he is very awkward. But again, there was a portion of my life, especially in high school, where I was incredibly awkward. I mean, that's even an understatement.
You still hold that title to this day.
Well, and I just think that's Paul Rudd playing a character.
I'm
go
to bed. That's it. I quit.
No, we love you, Brendan.
Yeah, we love you. Just kidding.
Jonathan, you're the new co-host right now. How about that? You've been promoted. Anyway, but that's why he's my number 3. But let's continue on for the sake of time. Jonathan, what do you have at number 2 for Paul Rudd performances and characters?
Well, this is my television reference. Now, who did you guys think I was going to say?
From Friends.
Not at all.
Ah!
This is Bobby Newport from Parks and Rec. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
He was
I forgot.
so
Okay, never mind. I take
funny.
it back. That makes more sense.
When the whole running, was it not, I can't remember if it was mayor. I forget what they were running for. And he's running against Leslie Knope, Amy Poehler. He's like the most sweet, innocent, likable, naive, dumb, gullible. Like it was so neat to see. He wasn't going for the specific laughs,
Sure.
But it was just he created this character, and especially the setting of Parks and Rec where you have all these other strong characters. It was absolutely hilarious. Like when he showed back up for the last season, I was just so happy. I was like, oh my God, Bobby Newport's back on Parks and Rec. Like I love Paul Rudd, and he does such a great job playing these unique characters.
I am not really familiar with that character. I will say my wife would have voted for his character on Friends, and I know she wrote that in our poll this week, but it sounds interesting. And it's kind of a good transition, I think, to my number 2. I'll just bounce off of that, Brendan, because you were talking, Jonathan, about how Bobby is kind of this dumb character, and I think that's appropriate for my number 2 because I'm going with his character of Ned from Our Idiot Brother.
Oh wow.
I laugh a lot at this movie. I mean, it is so dumb and ridiculous, but it also is very charming at the same time and very endearing, I think, because this character is so oblivious and so dumb. He has no idea what's going on, but I think that's why I empathize with him. And he's also just very charismatic all the way throughout. And he does have this charming personality. I guess the best way to equate my experience with this is like when you watch a suspense movie and the audience knows what's going to happen, but the characters don't. That's how I feel with Ned, because I just want to yell at him like you do those characters in those suspense movies. Like, stop doing that. Like you know that you're going to get in trouble, or you're going to get yourself into a situation you don't want to be in, and you just want to scream at the TV. And that's how I was with him. But at the same time, I love how his character here plays into his sister's lives and how they're kind of bouncing him around like they're not even sure what to do with him. But at the end of it, he also becomes this catalyst for change for his sisters, which I love. So for me, it has some heart there at the end, as well as it is just really funny. It's an interesting story that I just personally engage with, and I love this character. And I also just love the way he looks. He's got this huge looming beard and this long hair. He doesn't even look like Paul Rudd at all.
Right.
And I just love how that plays into his character. He utilizes that well. So Our Idiot Brother makes my number 2.
And that just ruins it for everyone, all right? I know you've got a really important life, Miranda, but you know what? Some of us just like to sit around, enjoy our family, and play a game of charades. What's so funny, Nat? By the way, when a kid goes, you should at least give him the opportunity to act out his hint, all right, before you jump in with the answer, even if you know it.
It's the same stupid clue Mom always puts in for River.
So what? You're so cool, you're too bored, is that it?
For God's sakes, Ned, we have other things on our minds.
So you have to make it miserable for everybody?
Okay, Ned, we're gonna play.
Just play the game.
Let's get serious.
Just play the f***ing game! God damn it! I just want to sit around with my family and play a fucking game of charades. I just want to sit and I just want to play the game. I want to play charades. What's the big deal about that? Why can't you all just play?
Is it bad that I've never seen this film?
Not necessarily, but
it's worth seeing.
I think it's worth seeing too. Yeah,
that's what I've heard. It's just I never got the chance to sit down and watch it. So I'm hope I'm not getting the vibe that's like, oh, you haven't seen it, you got it. Like, what is wrong with you? I've always wanted to. I heard some good things, especially even when it came out.
I think it's really great. It's one of those that I had no expectations for. It was one that we just kind of rented out of Redbox, like last minute thing. And maybe part of the reason I liked it so much, I'll admit, I wasn't 100% sober. And maybe that played into me just laughing my head off the whole time, but I loved it. So I still think whether you're sober or not is irrelevant. I think it's still a fun movie that's worth watching at some point.
Especially if you're going for a Paul Rudd character.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
another one of his great characters.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good point for liking that. And now I'm kind of definitely intrigued to check this one out. I'll have to put it on the list. It's going on the list.
It's going on the list. Can't wait to hear your thoughts.
But anyway, JD, you talked about him being a bit, physically unrecognizable in a film like that. And just looking at the film's poster, you can definitely kind of see that. But for some of those reasons is the reason why I'm picking for my number 2 Sex Panther himself, Brian Fantana from the Anchorman film. So I guess it's kind of a cheat, I guess, because I say the Anchorman films, even though in reality it's really Anchorman: The Legend of Ron Burgundy, rather than The Legend Continues. But he's so unrecognizable in this film, and not just from the way he looks, but it's his stupidity and his sarcasm just makes me laugh every time. And and some of the jokes that he cracks out, especially there are 2 jokes that he cracks in the second film that I'll never forget. And the one where he's teaching Brick Tamlin, played by Steve Carell, how to go on a date proper, and he's showing him all these different types of condoms. And he says, here's the Holy Ghost. I have gotten 7 women impregnated with this baby. And then freaking Will Ferrell's like, isn't the point of the condom not to impregnate the woman? And he goes, as the ancient saying goes, nope. Just the reason why I'm picking this, or at least his character in these films, is because it shows how quick-witted he is. It shows how good he is at one-liners, because a lot of these jokes, he's coming up on the fly.
Right.
And I think that's one of the big charms about a guy like Paul Rudd, is that he has a very specific persona and a very specific shtick, I guess you can say, that's also at the same time incredibly likable. And I think this is a perfect example of that, and that's why I have to put it at my number 2.
Yeah, no, I will agree with that, Brennan. I am trying to recall some specific moments, and I'm struggling with that, but I do remember liking this quite a bit. I remember some of those jokes that you were just talking about, and even just remembering from the second one, like early on, like when we first meet him in the second movie and how they get on that bus, like all of that I thought was one of the best parts of that movie, because I didn't like the second one as much overall, but I feel like his moments in that movie worked.
Like the second one as much as the first one?
No, I think that's impossible, but I will say those moments with Paul Rudd are great, and I would argue that all those cameos at the end of the second one was still really good. But
Yeah, I would completely agree. But I still think Paul Rudd, or Brian Fantana specifically, is actually one of my favorite characters from both those films. I mean, a lot of the emphasis is put on Steve Carell and Will Ferrell, but I think not as much credit as Paul Rudd does get for those films, I still don't think it's enough. I think a lot of the sarcasm that film is known for is mostly because of him, and I love him for it. But you know what? Let's keep going. Let's get to the most exciting part of this list, obviously, our favorites. So, Jonathan, who is your favorite Paul Rudd character that you've seen in film and or TV?
My little drum roll here. I don't know if you can hear this, but number 1, going way back, 1995, the pretty much introduction of Paul Rudd to the world, to the masses, was the character of Josh in Clueless.
Wow.
It was a good learning experience, at least for me. I want to be a lawyer. But you don't need to be doing this. Go out and have fun. Go shopping.
You think that's all I do? I'm just a ditz with a credit card?
No, that's not what I meant. It's you're young and beautiful and well, what?
You think I'm beautiful?
You know you're gorgeous, all right? And popular and but this is not why I come here. This is a good learning experience for me.
You already said that.
I mean, first off, I think anyone my age doing a top 3 Paul Rudd, how do you not mention Josh in Clueless? Like, I mean, that's just, he was great. He was so refreshing, and ironically, he was one of the less funny parts of that movie. I mean, one, I would call Clueless one of the quintessential 90s movies, like is as important to the 90s as, say, anything, Molly Ringwald was in the 80s, or John Cusack from the 80s. I mean, Clueless is like the 90s movie. And he played the heartthrob. He played the older hot guy that, that she gets with. It's just, I mean, yeah, he was, I remember many girls being so, starry-eyed and dreamy over Paul Rudd, and so it's kind of ironic to me to see that was pretty much his first real big movie role.
Sure. And
then here we are, like 20 years later, and he is now like this leading man superhero, back in a sort of heartthrob way. And it was funny just to see him play the straight guy. He wasn't delivering all the comic jokes in that movie. So yes, Josh from Clueless.
Well, I grew up in the 90s, and you were saying that this was a quintessential viewing for
Please don't tell me you haven't seen Clueless.
I've never seen this.
You haven't seen Clueless?
I've never seen it.
Oh my God, I cannot believe this.
Look, I'll say, like, I've seen like clips and glimpses because my sister watched this a lot, but I've never seen it.
That would be like a kid of the 2000s saying they hadn't seen Mean Girls. I mean, come on.
I just never.
Oh my gosh.
Been my cup of tea.
Clueless is a great, with a capital G, movie.
Sure.
Great
and
movie.
We got a lot of feedback for this film on Facebook and Twitter and stuff when we threw out the poll this week. So you're clearly not alone in that sentiment.
I would say anyone my age, anyone in their 30s, that's what they think. Paul Rudd, they think of the character Josh.
Well, see, there you go. I got a few months before I turned 30. So.
I've got 7 years on you
before childhood goes out the window.
Exactly. So I got a good month left in me.
Gosh, make me feel old. You haven't seen Clueless.
It has been so long since I have seen this one, but now that you talking about it, Jonathan, I kind of want to revisit this one too. But I think I saw it in the 90s when I was probably too young to watch it. But I that's an interesting pick. It really is. And I haven't remembered the film as much since I've seen it, but I kind of want to go back and revisit it because of that. So that's another one to add to the list. It's going on the list. But anyway, let's hope you could take back some of that shame. So how about you, JD? Who is your number one?
Well, my number one, I guess, going off of Jonathan's description of the Paul Rudd character and Clueless, and how he is kind of the straight guy, that's kind of where I'm going with my number one as well. And I'm actually going to the David Gordon Green film Prince Avalanche from 2013. And what I loved so much about this one is just how refreshingly different it is, and how just strange and how weird this character is, and how this movie is in general. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a Richard Linklater film, but shot almost in a Terrence Malick kind of style, in the sense that it's just two characters. It's Alvin and Lance, played by Paul Rudd and Emile Hirsch, respectively. And it's just their journey of essentially painting lines in the middle of a road during the summertime after some wildfires in Texas. And it's just those two characters hanging out in the woods and talking and having their experiences throughout this summer. And the Paul Rudd character specifically is really interesting and neat to me because he is very motivated by his girlfriend who lives in the town about 10 miles away. And you could also get a sense that he's very isolated. He's just not necessarily there mentally, you could argue. And as the film progresses, you really start to see how much of an impact that has on this character. And like I said, there's some pretty funny parts to this movie, but it's mostly straight. And Paul Rudd is giving a really fantastic dramatic performance that I found engrossing. It was absolutely riveting. There's some really interesting scenes where the Emil Hirsch character, he leaves to go into town, and so the Paul Rudd character is by himself, and we get a sense of that isolation. And again, not just physically alone, but how mentally isolated he is at the same time. He's going to the foundation of where this house used to sit, and he's kind of almost replaying what it would be like to live in this house, even though there's nothing there. It's very strange, very weird, but you get a sense of what this character is like. And there's many scenes like that throughout the movie that I just found absolutely amazing. And I think the film also touches on these ideas of bonding and the necessity for bonding, which I think the Paul Rudd character also nails really wonderfully. And so for me, I just was absolutely captivated by this performance and what was happening in this movie. And for David Gordon Green, it was really nice to see him come back to this kind of style of filmmaking, for one. And for Paul Rudd specifically, it's just one of those that's different from what we know from him in his comedies. It's a really good dramatic performance, and one that just tops the list for me as far as him just doing something that just really resonates, I think.
I think that, let me take this back, because I think earlier when we were talking about on our list, I said that role models, his role in Role Models probably would have been my number 4. I take it back. That's more number 5. His role in Prince Avalanche is really my number 4. This was so close to making my list. And to be honest, I think of all the David Gordon Green films I've seen, this one might be my favorite. I would
agree, yeah.
This is a very underrated film, and it's a great dramatic role for him. I really, really wanted to find room on this list for a good dramatic role from him, and this would have been it. Just personal biasness and other things that I preferred kept it off, which was so unfortunate, because you hit the nail on the head, JD. This is a great film, and really just because of, or mostly because of how well Paul Rudd is able to carry it dramatically. And there are even some great touches of humor in this film that I think are very well earned. And he develops a great relationship with Emil Hirsch in this film, who is also equally great. It's a great duality that's going on there.
Yeah, and it's not to say that I don't like his comedic performances. I love his comedic performances.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff. I just love how this is such a layered, dramatic performance, and he gives some scenes in that movie that stand out as some of the best of the entire year for me for 2013. I mean, he's really, really wonderful, and he has to sell it because he's very awkward and he's very strange, and like I said, he's very isolated, and that's not necessarily easy to pull off the way that he does. It's wonderful. So I just love that kind of left turn he takes for his career, I guess, and I think he just absolutely nailed it.
Well, see, this is where I say I have not seen this movie, so
and that's fair. It's a smaller film from a few years ago, so that's more understandable. Yeah.
Is it still on Netflix? I don't know if it's still. It was on Netflix, but I don't know if it's still.
If it's streaming,
Prince Avalanche, huh?
Yeah, Prince Avalanche.
I'll have to add that to my queue on Netflix.
Yeah. So
and it is a short film. I thought it was only just over an hour and a half. At least I think it was.
It's relatively short. Yeah,
it's an easy watch.
Yeah, Emil Hirsch is great in it too, and I don't know how you feel about David Gordon Green, but it's certainly one of his best too. Because I don't really like his mainstream comedies a whole lot. Like Your Highness and whatever that Jonah Hill one he did too. Like those are awful, awful movies. But this one, it just gets him back to his roots of filmmaking. So if you like David Gordon Green and his smaller films, easily his best one, I think.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Definitely do it. But like I said, I really wish I could make room for him. But continuing on to what my number one is essentially a lot of the same reasons for why I picked Brian Fantana as my number 2. But for my number 1, I'm going for a lot of the same reasons because I think it's his funniest character. I think every single line of dialogue out of him in this film, I laugh hysterically, and if you don't laugh at everything, I think there's something wrong with you.
I think I know what you're going to say. I think I know where you're going.
And he has maybe 5 minutes of screen time, and that is his role of Chuck, the surfer instructor from Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Okay, when we're out there, I want you to ignore your instincts. I'm going to be your instincts. Kunu will be your instincts. Don't do anything. Don't try to surf. Don't do it. The less you do, the more you do. Let's see it pop up. Pop it up. That's not it at all. Do less. Get down. Try less. Do it again. Pop up. Nope. Too slow. Do less. Pop up. Pop up. You're doing too much. Do less. Pop down. Pop up now. Stop. Get down. Get down there. Remember, don't do anything. Nothing. Pop up. Well, you got to do more than that because you're just laying. That looks like you're boogie boarding. Just do it. Feel it. Pop up. Yeah, that wasn't quite it, but we're gonna figure it out there. Let's go surfing. Come on. Everybody's learning how. Come on. The weather outside is weather.
That is not what I was thinking you were going to say, but you are correct. That is one of his funny roles.
Yeah,
yes,
it is. Yeah.
Just the second that he is introduced, or he goes up to him, he's like, "Are you Chuck, like the surfer instructor?" That's what Jason Segel says. Oh, it's like, "Oh man, they won't change that. That's my mainland name." It's like, "My Hawaiian name is Kunu." It's like, "Oh, what does that mean?" It means Chuck.
He's so good. Yeah.
And then cracks out the "You sound like y'all from London." It's just, and every single one.
It's like totally.
He's got the best one-liners. He's a great surfer dude, great classic surfer dude here. But everything he cracks out in this film for the limited amount of screen time he has is just
great.
Pure gold, and he steals every single scene that he's in. I mean, the stars of the four stars of this film are Jason Segel, Mila Kunis, Kristen Bell, and Russell Brand. And every time Paul Rudd is on the screen, he steals the spotlight from every single one of them combined. It is spectacular.
He is so good.
Yeah.
I think I may be a bit biased because Forgetting Sarah Marshall is one of my favorite comedies of like the past couple years.
I agree too.
Yeah,
I love that
good.
movie.
Easily. So maybe could be some biasness there, but this character is just. I love everything this guy says, and I can watch the film over and over again, just looking forward to his scenes. I would love to see someone just cut all of his scenes together and make a short film out of it. I'd watch it over and over on repeat. It absolutely would. It's fantastic. But with that said, I'm sure everyone has quite a bit of other honorable mentions they want to talk about, so let's throw those out there quickly. How about you, Jonathan? Any honorable mentions you want to say?
Well, where I thought you were going with your number one was I thought you were going to go with the character of David from The 40-Year-Old Virgin. Because I mean, not one of the main characters, but oh my goodness, did he chew up every scene he had. It was pretty great.
Sure.
Yep.
Nobody I think really saw this film, but the little rom-com Admission with him and Tina Fey. I really like that movie.
I haven't seen it yet either.
It's what I want in a rom-com. It was, he was not super hilarious, but he was, the leading man. And playing off Tina Fey, it was really good. And then I'd say, I can't think of the character's name, the teacher he played in Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Yep. Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
I had too.
Loved it.
Those I would say are probably my honorable mentions for him.
Good deal. How about you, JD?
Well, honestly, I wish I would have gotten a chance to spend more time on this. Unfortunately, because of time and work and us kind of getting to record this early, I didn't get a chance to do as much research as I would have liked. But
so essentially, Ant-Man. That's the only reason why.
I also had Mr. Anderson down as well, and then the only other two that I wrote down was Brian from Anchorman and Danny from Role Models, as we've already previously talked about. I mean, there's so many comedic roles I wish that I just had time to look into. I just ran out of time, but I really like him as an actor. There's not much I don't like him in, at least from a performance character standpoint.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to be honest, as far as honorable mentions for me, I think we've named them all as far as what you guys either had on your list or just listed as an honorable mention. I have no more to add. The only one that came close, I will say, is his character from the film Knocked Up. Which I think the thing is that
Pete.
He's good. He's great in the film. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that there's enough there. As I think there's too much spotlight taken between Katherine Heigl and Leslie Mann and even Seth Rogen and some of Seth Rogen's buddies in the film who are essentially playing themselves, that there's not enough room for Paul Rudd to really shine in that film until the mushroom scene towards the end. But but as much as I love the film, that one didn't quite cut it, because I just want to mention that in case there's other Knocked Up purists out there who are like, well, what about his character from Knocked Up? It's like, you can't miss that. It's like, well, that's why I didn't put it there, but it came close. It came close.
Makes sense, absolutely. So anyway, let us know how your picks stack up against ours. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com, leave a comment on Facebook or Twitter, or on our site at InSessionFilm.com.
All right, before we move on, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad, okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
All right, so for our poll last week, we very conveniently asked, what is your favorite film starring or featuring Paul Rudd? And the options that we put out there, a bit more of the popular ones. There's too many to put on this list, I gotta say, but we focused on, I think, a good few. We had Wet Hot American Summer, Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Role Models, I Love You Man, and Prince Avalanche closing off that list. But here is the surprise, the one that ended up winning at 26.3%, I Love You Man.
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
That is a big
Huge surprise. I did not expect that.
I will say, though, and I mentioned this earlier, that we're recording this early than what we normally do, and so we didn't have as much time to gather the votes like we normally do, so maybe that played a part into it. Like, if we had a few more days to gather
Those
some
might
more
be
votes.
different
Yeah, it
results.
could be different results. I'm just
Gotcha.
saying, like, that could be a factor, possibly.
It's possible. Or they just could love I Love You
Or
Man.
maybe,
It's very
possibly.
possible.
Yeah,
it's very
absolutely,
possible. But
so.
I like the surprising element, so let's just stick with that.
Exactly, yes.
But anyway, coming in at second place at 15.8% was one that's not so surprising, Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, and then coming in at third place, just under that, 13.5% was Knocked Up. Those were the results I was a bit more expecting,
Yeah, sure.
But actually, I'm surprised we didn't see much love for Wet Hot American Summer. I thought there's definitely a bit of a cult following for that, and Netflix is bringing a prequel film back, or a
show
prequel
coming
series,
back.
I think
Yeah.
it is actually. So there's some revisitations going on with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually another one I have to catch up with, honestly. So, and I've heard some really good things about it.
I mean, the cast is incredible.
And it's the same director as Role Models, David Wayne.
Yeah, which I like. So I certainly look forward to catching up on it. Just real fast, as far as a few write-ins, we did get a few for Clueless. We also got a write-in for The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and also a write-in for I Don't Like Him. How can you not like Paul Rudd?
Wow.
So, fair enough, I guess.
I have two guesses of who that might be.
Yeah, so me too. His name is either Kevin or Tim. But
that's what I was just gonna say. You were the one that said it, not me. But I agree.
We could be wrong. Maybe they both like him, but it's fun to assume anyway. So.
Yeah, we love you guys. We love you, men.
Absolutely. Anyway, thanks to everyone that did vote this week. We really do appreciate it. But stay tuned. We have some more Marvel stuff to talk about. We're going to recap Phase 2 for Marvel and give a grade on what we think of it overall. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey guys, I just want to pause for a quick second to say a huge thank you to those that are supporting the show. We really do appreciate it. And if you want to help support us, there's a couple ways that you can help us out. One, if you go to our website at InSessionFilm.com, you're going to see our bonus content tab there in our main menu. And if you click on that, you'll find some awesome bonus content that we put up there from time to time. And while it is free to listen to, we do encourage and appreciate a small donation of 99 cents. And this week for our bonus content for episode 126, we are going to be bringing back DJ Valentine from Simplistic Reviews for another edition of Nerdin' Out. And we're going to be talking about all the stuff that happened at Comic-Con. It's going to be a lot of fun, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Another way you can help us out is just a donation via PayPal directly on our site at InSessionFilm.com/donate. You go there, you're going to see the PayPal button there. You can either give a one-time donation or sign up for a monthly subscription that just recurs every single month, and you can set all that up there on the site. And another way to help us out is Patreon.com. It's a really cool site where you can sign up to essentially donate per show, and you're going to receive free gifts in the process. There's a couple different levels there, and depending on the kind of level you get, you're going to get some more free stuff in the process. It's really cool. And again, you can find all of the information at patreon.com/InSessionFilm.
And there's also a way to support us by going to the InSession Film store. At the InSession Film store at InSessionFilm.com/store. We've got a lot of cool items there with our logo slapped right on it. You may want a cool tie, a mug, an iPhone case. And don't worry, none of these things are very microscopic in size, much like what happens in Ant-Man. They're all
Yes.
very tangible and all very big at heart because we made them for you. But a lot of great stuff there. We can also customize something for you, especially if you see something on there don't see something on there rather that you would like, and we can definitely get something worked out there for you. A great way to support us as well. And another way is that you may notice as well, we are sponsored by Audible.com, and with Audible, you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial by simply going to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. And with Audible, you can get over 150,000 titles to choose from for your smart device, whatever it might be, either iPhone, Android, even your Kindle or an MP3 player. Maybe you want to try and read up on the latest bits of Marvel. You can definitely find some stuff there to your liking, and it's very convenient for you to read up on as much like that and very quickly in any location that you want. It is a great way to support us in the process and also read up on some of the coolest collateral out there from the sci-fi, geekdom, as well as comic books.
Absolutely, and no matter what you do, even just a subscription to iTunes or like on Facebook or follow on Twitter, it all goes a long way, and we really do appreciate everyone's support.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan, and we are Talking in Circles. Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as Geekcast Radio's newest edition.
And as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom. We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions.
We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at geekcastradio.com.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 126, and now we're going to be recapping Marvel Phase 2, which includes, of course, Ant-Man, as we talked about earlier in the show. And just to kind of recap Marvel Phase 2, it started with Iron Man 3 after the first Avengers. It also includes Thor: The Dark World, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers: Age of Ultron, and, of course, Ant-Man. So, on that note, we'll toss it to you first, Jonathan. What do you think about Marvel Phase 2? And maybe give some insight into maybe what your favorite film was of this phase.
Oh, wow. That's a hard question. But Phase 2, I think, for the most part, has been a major success. Has certainly been a win. I mean, I think between now Ant-Man, Winter Soldier, and Guardians of the Galaxy, you have some of the best movies Marvel has given us.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's where I remember those highs much more than the lows of Iron Man 3 and Thor, whatever.
The Dark World.
Yeah, it's, you know. Yeah. So on a whole, I mean, this year was interesting because Age of Ultron did not deliver on the expectations. It was not horrible, but it. You know, so I'm glad that Ant-Man's the end, because Ant-Man, I think, ends on a much higher,
big high note,
funner note than you know,
than what Avengers: Age of Ultron would have. Yeah.
But in comparison to the first phase, it's like the first phase there was not as much expectation. You know, like the first phase ended with Avengers, which blew everyone away. It was, the individual movies were like, okay, I mean, you know, we got Iron Man's great, but I don't know if I like Hulk, or Iron Man 2 feels too convoluted. But then you end with Avengers, you end on such a high note. So for phase 2 to capture a lot of what was good, deliver these incredible, like Guardians of the Galaxy, things coming out of nowhere. Winter Soldier was so much better than the first Captain America. You know, they really surprised and had some really incredible highs. I guess what I'm worried about is some of the Marvel tying everything together, so many heroes, some of the problems I had with Avengers. Like, I'm worried, is phase 3 going to be way too convoluted? You know?
Sure.
Like, I love Ant-Man being Ant-Man, and not, you know, it tied and fit into the universe, and yet didn't feel forced. It didn't feel...
there wasn't too much tying it in.
Right.
Yeah.
But I worry about phase 3. I worry about where they're going with everything.
Okay, what about you, Brendan?
Yeah, well, first off, I do echo your concerns about phase 3, because you already look at phase 3, or at least first let's look at phase 1 and phase 2. We've had, I think, like 6 films in each of those phases. Now in phase 3, we've got almost 10 films coming out. We do have a lot of standalone films and a lot of, new characters starting to come in, and each one getting their own starting film. But there is the concern that it may eventually kind of fall into, I call it the Spider-Man 3 syndrome, where they have to juggle all these characters and these things, and are they up for it? I personally think they are, but it definitely is a worthy concern to have. And I also think you made a lot of points that I agree with as far as overall thoughts with Marvel Phase 2 as we're doing for this discussion. I will say that I had a very difficult time trying to find, like, if we're trying to slap a grade on Marvel Phase 2, it's very challenging for me, because at one point, I think you've got easily the 2 best films of the entire MCU came out of Marvel's Phase 2, and that's The Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy for me.
I agree.
I think on our ranking, I put Avengers above Guardians of the Galaxy, but in time, I've learned to love Guardians even more
We've sat with it longer, right? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and I've learned to appreciate that film more, and there's much more rewatchability for that film, and it's, as a standalone, I think it works even better. But at the same time, I think it's also churned out the 2 worst films of the MCU, and that's Thor: The Dark World, and my personal least favorite still is Iron Man 3. I know that you're probably shaking in your chair a bit with that one, Jonathan, because I know you're a bit when I said I hated that film.
I didn't hate Iron Man 3, but I know a lot of people who do, and it was not...
I couldn't stand it. And it wasn't just because of that twist they do with the Mandarin. I think other portions of it the movie didn't work for me. But that's beside the point. The point is that I think from a consistency standpoint, I think Marvel's Phase 2, as far as quality specifically, I think Phase 2 has been a lot more inconsistent and irregular in churning out the great films versus the bad films, whereas Phase 1, I think, was more consistently on a more positive note, even though, yes, the Incredible Hulk wasn't as great. I kind of like the first Thor, and I'm also a bit partial to the Captain America, the First Avenger, because I really like the first half of it. I do think the second half does get a bit very weak at the knees, to say the least, but the first Iron Man's still great, and the Avengers is fantastic for every reason that we already know. But from a consistency standpoint, I think Phase 1 has been more consistent, but the most exciting points of this entire saga has come from Phase 2.
Right.
And the most exciting hype that we're getting for Phase 3 is obviously because of Phase 2, and at the same time, I think it has churned out the 2 best films in this saga so far, and it does close on a high note with Ant-Man. That is easily making its way to potentially being a top 5 film for me within the MCU. Even though Avengers Age of Ultron was a little bit disappointing, it's still a good film. So it's a bit challenging, though. But I will say, though, as far as what the MCU has been able to achieve and accomplish, a lot of credit has to go with Phase 2. I think the hype is even continuing to grow, and the excitement for Phase 3 is there. And I think you got to credit Phase 2 for doing something right there.
Yeah, I will kind of echo your guys' thoughts, especially I like what you're talking about, Brendan, with Phase 1 as far as its consistency, and it sounds like I might even be a little bit higher than both of you guys are on Phase 1, because I really enjoyed it. I think the Hulk movie is actually really underrated. I really enjoyed that movie a lot, and I would love to see another standalone Hulk movie. I'm also pretty high on the first Thor. I really enjoyed that one. I liked the first Thor. Captain America.
I did not love first Captain.
I know you didn't, but I quite enjoyed it.
You fell asleep, Jonathan.
Yes, I quite enjoyed it. And of course, the Avengers was just incredible. So when we get to Phase 2, I completely agree with you guys that, of course, we have two of the highest moments of everything we've seen before in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and Guardians. But I'm with you, Brendan. I hated Iron Man 3. It's the only movie in this entire universe that I would use that word with. I would say that with everything else, I at least enjoyed it to a degree, even if I was disappointed with it. That's the only one I just flat out do not like. Of course, like Thor: The Dark World more than you too, Jonathan. I know you didn't like that one a whole lot, but I enjoyed it. But that one's still near the bottom of the list for me. And Avengers Age of Ultron, I still like, despite its flaws. I mean, I still had a good time with it. So, and like you were saying, Jonathan, I'm so glad that it ends on Ant-Man, which is a much higher note, and it's a lot more fun, and I'm excited to see how that transitions us into Civil War, and we're going to see all these other characters come into play. So I would say that Phase 2 isn't quite as consistent for me, but we have some really high highs, even though I have a very low in it as well. And just a disappointment in Ultron. I mean, that would be the biggest word I would use for it. I still liked it, but I was still disappointed with it.
It didn't meet all expectations.
Exactly. So,
because see, the thing with Phase 1 is they're still finding their footing.
They
were building, and then they hit with Avengers,
big time,
and then Phase 2, it's got the hard, like, okay, now how do we follow? Which was definitely one of the things going against Iron Man 3 to be the first movie coming out after.
How do you follow that?
Right. And so that's where I think Phase 2 was a little bit like, okay, we're still finding our footing, or we're gonna try some really off the wall things with Ant-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy, and wow, these actually hit. These are success, So this is the thing, though. Marvel has such a reputation now. Like, is everything going to either be really high or really low? Like, will there be just some okay, mediocre movies, or will, because of expectation level and what Marvel's already done and built in these first two phases, will Phase 3 be like either great, every movie be either great or a dud?
Yeah, and I mean, you make some good points. I mean, it certainly has raised expectations, and people, I think, go in expecting to see certain things, and that can certainly be a bad thing. But for me, I haven't necessarily looked at those expectations, and outside of Ultron, I had probably high expectations just because of Joss Whedon.
We all did.
Back. Ultron looked awesome in the trailers, but I try to go in with some reasonable expectations.
Right.
And so, and I think that's perhaps why I enjoy most of these. I think that's why I enjoy Thor: The Dark World, because I try to pick out what I like about it and I have fun with it. Or even Brendan at the end of Ant-Man with those end credit scenes. Now, was I disappointed I didn't get to see Spider-Man? Maybe, but I still enjoyed it because it plays into what I'm liking about these movies and what I hope to like about Civil War. So, I mean...
And here's one thing. I mean, we're recording this on Thursday night after seeing Ant-Man. Ant-Man's not been out all weekend yet.
Yeah,
we don't know if this movie's going to be a huge success or not.
It could be a flop, too,
I mean, we're loving it, but that doesn't mean everyone's going to flock out to the theater and see it. You know?
No, it's a good point, yeah.
I think the interesting thing, though, is first off, I will agree with you, JD, as far as trying to go into these films, very open-minded, essentially, and not letting expectations get the best of us. We can look forward to films and be excited for them, but don't go in thinking, oh, because this past film was fantastic, this one's got to be fantastic. The only problem with that is the most of the movie-going public doesn't have the ability to do that. And I think because the Avengers was so good, Marvel kind of accidentally dug themselves into a bit of a hole.
Yes.
And maybe it was their plan to release Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World after that, which are, a lot of people do consider them to be more of the mediocrity of the MCU, even though they have some fans and some not so, because as we're seeing here with Iron Man 3, we're definitely got some split opinions here. But maybe that was their plan to kind of slow down a bit before they just knocked our socks off with the Winter Soldier. But But the thing is that the Winter Soldier, I think, really is the turning point for this entire saga. I mean, people might argue that the Avengers was like, oh, this was really everyone coming together for the first time. This is the turning point here. But I think the Winter Soldier did things aesthetically and even just from a filmmaking standpoint that really continued to set a tone and a series of events that are continuing to infect all of these films that'll probably continue to all the way to the end of Phase 3. And the fact that it was so good of a film, I think you have to give a lot of credit for Phase 2 for what they were able to achieve there, is because they took a risk. Just like they took a risk with the first Avengers film, I think overall Phase 2 takes more risks, because the Winter Soldier itself, I think, was a huge risk in how they tackled that subject matter and put that political thriller first than anything else. That was a good risk. Guardians of the Galaxy was a huge risk because no one knew what the heck this was, and it became the biggest film of that year.
It had a raccoon character.
Right.
And a freaking talking tree that said 3 words in the whole, well, maybe more than 3 words. If you haven't seen the film, that's a spoiler. But then you have Ant-Man in here, another huge risk. And if it pays off, like, we don't know. I think it will pay
I
off.
hope it does.
I think people are going to eat it up.
I
think a lot of Paul Rudd fans are going to go into it, and it's going to introduce them to superhero films that they may not have really appreciated at this point in time.
Yep.
I think there's a possibility of that. But I think they've taken more risks here that are paying off. So I have more respect for Phase 2 for that reason, despite maybe the not so consistent nature of their films that Phase 1 may have had.
Well, and these are my other thoughts too, is, we're going into Phase 3 and Marvel's going to have its first, African-American lead.
Yeah.
It's going to have its first female lead. They're trying to get more diversity. I think the casting of Chadwick Boseman as the Black Panther.
Awesome.
I think
awesome.
I love him. Words cannot describe how much I love him as an actor. So I'm excited for that. But here, the other thing is Marvel set a standard. No one has ever done this. And come next year, we have DC/Warner Brothers trying to get in the game. Their first time competition is going to be there. So
which could be a great thing for Marvel.
It really could be.
That's why I'm rooting for DC more than anything, is we need that great competition.
Well, and Fox is trying hard with the X/Fantastic
Which
Four
I know you haven't
stuff.
liked, but I dug Days of Future Past, and Fantastic Four looks at least interesting. We'll see what happens with it, but I think that competition is great. It's great for everybody.
Right, as long as we don't oversaturate the market to the point where nobody wants to see superhero movies anymore.
And that's a real possibility,
it really
too.
is, right.
I will say one of my favorite things that happened during Phase 2 is actually something that happened not on screen, but what we are going to see here soon, and that's the addition of Spider-Man, is really exciting to me. So, and
I agree.
I know that's technically going to be part of Phase 3, but we did hear about it, I guess, a few months ago, or about a month ago or so. But
yeah,
and the addition of that, I think, has made not only changes to what we're going to see soon with Captain America: Civil War, but it's just made everybody so excited to maybe even go see Ant-Man, or maybe people that were down on Marvel, they love Spider-Man, so maybe that'll get them interested. I don't know, but I think the addition of Sony and Disney coming together is hopefully going to be really great. I'm really excited for it, and certainly was one of my favorite things that happened during this phase.
I think you could argue that Spider-Man could essentially be at least introduced within Phase 2, not only for that reason, but there is a Spider-Man reference in Ant-Man. I don't know if you guys caught it.
Absolutely. I immediately turned to my wife and said something to her about it.
Yeah, it's very subtle. It's not even really a reference. It's just more of like a mention more than anything else.
It is,
but it's absolutely there.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely there.
Well, and Brendan, you were talking about Winter Soldier being, the most important movie. I think it's why Marvel has handed the reins of pretty much Phase 3 to the Russo brothers. And so I like, that's one thing. I don't want to give a spoiler away for Ant-Man in that post-credit scene, but the tone, they have their own unique, distinct tone. And I really dig that, because I think it's a great blend of taking the gritty, that DC Warner Brothers is trying to do, and still keeping it grounded in Marvel and the Marvel fantasy.
Yeah.
So, but I'll say this: like with the Peyton Reed Ant-Man, I almost wish that Peyton Reed would shoot a scene in Civil War, just to shoot a scene, like because just to have that feel of with Ant-Man, right?
And it makes sense because that end credit scene certainly feels like the Russos, and the one thing I like about those two as well going into Phase 3, different than Joss Whedon, is that there's two of them.
Right.
So I'm hoping that in terms of fatigue, them working together can, I guess, kind of contradict that a little bit and hopefully get them through it more than just Whedon being so overwhelmed by himself.
And
that's a very good point, Katie, that they have a bit of that they can kind of compensate for each other, which I think is quite brilliant. I mean, it's almost like why the Coen brothers were able to churn out such great films at such a quick pace in the past. I mean, they've been a bit absent for a little while, but there was a point where they could keep going, and they never put anything out terrible. And I think the Russo brothers are a great example of that they can work well with each other, because you're right, Joss Whedon just got he got turned down by, or not turned down, I think that's the wrong word. He got turned off by how much he had to keep working at this.
Very much burnout.
It's to the point now he has no interest in making a director's cut for Avengers Age of Ultron.
So sad. I know.
And he has no desire to be back in the Marvel universe.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he just doesn't care anymore.
Right.
And it's very unfortunate, because I was so looking forward to seeing that director's cut, because I think that was where the good film of Age of Ultron was. And now we're unfortunately not going to get it, at least anytime soon.
Yeah, it is sad. I would agree, but hopefully at some point in the future they'll make up and kiss and they'll bring him back and we'll get that cut. So, I mean, because even just this week, X-Men: Days of Future Past got a new cut. Over a year later, that had additional scenes into it. So it's not out of the realms of impossibility that hopefully, even if it's a year or so later down the road, we could still get that cut, even if right now he's not interested.
Sure, and that's a good point.
All right, guys, well, let's get to final thoughts, and let's wrap this up a little bit. So, Jonathan, we'll toss it to you first. Any final thoughts on Phase 2 specifically, and what grade would you give Phase 2 for Marvel and the MCU?
Well, overall, I love Phase 2, and that's what I say. I just think of the highs more than the lows. I think of Guardians of the Galaxy, I think of Ant-Man, I think of Winter Soldier, and so overall, I give it an A, and it's one of those things that I wonder, will we ever have a phase as good as Phase 2?
Interesting. Okay, what about you, Brendan?
So I'm kind of in that same boat, that as inconsistent as Phase 2 may have had, it's not terribly inconsistent. I don't want that to sound like it's that much of a hyperbole, but there were some there were some low points, at least in the beginning of Phase 2. So from a consistency standpoint, I think I should take that into consideration. But as you're talking about, Jonathan, the highs of this phase, especially the Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy, and to a degree Ant-Man just below that, I think those are the shining moments here, and I think that has to carry a lot of weight here, and not just for the quality of them, for how good and entertaining that they are in their own right, but for how they tie into this overall saga and what they set up to come next. I think the borderline excitement and the intrigue that we have there, and the intrigue that we now have for Phase 3, is because of these high moments, and this phase would not work if it wasn't for those high moments. So I don't think I could quite go as high as an A, because I still have that lingering feeling that is Iron Man 3, and and that's where it gets difficult. So
I guess it's because I didn't hate Iron Man 3 as bad as you guys did.
I know, and that's fair. That's absolutely fair. It probably is the most polarizing film, at least of this entire saga. I can say it's definitely the love-hate film of this entire saga thus far. And I think we'll probably, I don't know if we'll get something as polarizing as this one was, but I didn't like it at all. And Thor: The Dark World, as enjoyable as that film was while I watched it, I don't really remember it at all.
And you don't want to repeat view.
And that's there are low moments here that it lingers there to the point I can't give this any higher than maybe an A-. I think that's the best I can go. But Winter Soldier, Guardians, and now it's just Ant-Man, just within the saga, really boost that up for me.
Yeah, you guys make some really great points, and I think as far as my grade, I think I'm going to still stick to be pretty high despite Iron Man 3 being easily the worst for me. But I really enjoyed Thor: The Dark World for what it was. Yeah, the bad guy is easily forgettable, and the Jane character is not great, but those moments between Thor and Loki are still as good as they have ever been, and I still enjoy the action sequences quite a lot. So I have to give it credit for that. And of course, we already talked about Winter Soldier and Guardians, and Avengers I still enjoy despite the flaws, and Ant-Man, it fits so well into the vein of what I loved about the origin stories we saw in Phase 1. It was fun. We had some great characters. I liked this bad guy more than we saw in some of the other ones as well. So I would have to stick it really high up there, especially if we're just ranking the origin stories themselves. It might be my second favorite behind the first Iron Man. So I really enjoyed it. So for that reason alone, the biggest factor, like you, Brennan, is how much does Iron Man 3 negate or take away from my grade? And, given all those reasons and how much I enjoyed those other films, I'm going to say that outweighs my hatred for Iron Man 3, and I'm going to go with an A. I'm still going to stick with an A because I really enjoyed the rest of the phase, even though Iron Man 3 is garbage. But even in Iron Man 3, though, there are still things to appreciate, and there are things that I do appreciate about that film, even though I don't like it a whole lot overall. So
sure, like Shane's Black writing overall is not that bad. In fact, I think his writing overall is pretty good. But that's one thing.
No, I completely agree with that. That wasn't so much the problem as much as it was the twist and a few other things. But anyway, on that note, one, if you agree or disagree, of course, hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. We would love to hear your thoughts on the matter on Marvel Phase 2. And before we get out of here, Jonathan, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me back. I sure do love being the resident comic book geek who gets to come talk about movies.
And we appreciate it. We love having you on the show. So glad to have you here once again.
Yeah, I think I just got to say, so I think you're going to have to become our honorary Marvel guest. So should we secure a spot for Captain America Civil War for you right now?
Might as well, yeah.
I would love it. Count me in.
We'll do it. Yeah, we'll mark it on the calendar right now. So before we get out of here, though, where can people find you on Twitter and online?
I am at Jonathan Barry on Twitter. It's pretty much me. I tweet about a little bit of everything, pop culture, mostly comic book related, and a lot of hipster music. I'll admit,
I was gonna say
I'm a
talk
big
about music a lot.
junkie too.
So yeah, definitely go give him a follow. Amazing guy to get into conversation with about movies and whatnot. So we really do appreciate you being here, man. And on that note, that should do it for this week's show. Just a reminder to not only follow us on Facebook and Twitter, but you can also find us on Google Plus and YouTube. Just search InSession Film and you'll find us there. We do try to respond to every piece of email, so email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. And also sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that on Facebook by clicking the newsletter tab or on our site at InSessionFilm.com/newsletter.
And for more thoughts on the films that we watch, you can check us out on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. You can also find us at LostAtHomePodcast.com. Our good friends who also feature our shows and reviews every week there. You can find us there as well. Also, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. And also, while you are on iTunes, leave us a review and comment there. We appreciate some feedback there as well. And lastly, you can check out our Listen Now page, which is on our website at InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And the InSession Film Podcast is supported by our super awesome listeners like you. Once again, if you want to help us, just go to our website at InSessionFilm.com. Click on that bonus content tab in our main menu to hear that bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. And once again, we will be doing another edition of Nerding Out with DJ Valentine, talking about all the fun stuff from Comic-Con. So stay tuned for that later on in the week. You can also check out the InSession Film store or simply go to InSessionFilm.com/donate. You'll see a bunch of information there and how you can help us. One thing that I would highly recommend is checking out our mobile app, where you can hear everything we do under one roof for just a one-time fee of $1.99. You can find that app on the Amazon Market for Android devices, the Windows 8 phone store for Windows devices, and the Podcast Box app for iOS devices. And you can see all those details on the site at InSessionFilm.com/apps. Brendan, what are we doing on the show next week?
Next week, let's do Southpaw. We're going to go revisit this role with Jake Gyllenhaal possibly trying to fight for his lost Oscar nomination that he... I don't know where it was. I mean, apparently he received the nomination for Best Actor in Leading Role with Nightcrawler, but I guess I don't know. I don't know what happened to it, but
his invitation got lost in the mail. Apparently,
yeah. And now this is him in the ring trying to fight the person that lost in the mail for him.
And I will say, I was pretty excited for this movie until I watched the trailer, and it ruined the whole damn thing. But
yeah, I'm hoping that there's more to it than just that trailer.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
I'm really hoping that maybe some of those quote unquote spoilers maybe happen in the first 5 minutes, and we were supposed to know from the get-go. So maybe
that's true. That could be true.
That's very possible. So let's hope for the best. But on top of that, with Southpaw being a sports film, obviously, we decided we'd go back and look at our favorite, or for our top 3, our favorite sports movie scenes. And I think there's a lot we can pick from there. We've done our top 3 sports movies before, so we're going to try and go a little bit more in depth with that. And then, as I talked about with Jake Gyllenhaal kind of being snubbed for his role in Nightcrawler, for our discussion segment, let's do a role of what the snub, and kind of in honor of Jake Gyllenhaal and his many great roles. So, but specifically taking a look at his performance in Nightcrawler is a big example of that. But he's got a lot of great roles that I think, seriously, what the snub? I mean, that's the best way I could put it. So we're going to have some fun there as well.
Yeah, I certainly do look forward to getting into that. Before we get out of here, Jonathan, any final thoughts on anything before we leave today?
Well, I just am really glad that you guys, had me out.
Yeah,
I'm a little sad that we have like the whole rest of the year without another, Marvel movie to look forward to. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm hoping against hope that Fantastic Four is good.
Yeah,
and I'm just, we got Star Wars to carry us nerds through to Civil War. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to that. It was very cool. I don't know if they played this before your screening, Brendan, but Jonathan and I did see the trailer on the big screen
in 3D. Nonetheless,
it was so good.
Okay,
even though I've seen that trailer 100 times, I saw it in 3D.
I know
it was
so
great.
good.
This was I saw it as well. It was my first time seeing the trailer in 3D on a big screen, a very big IMAX screen, and I don't like 3D. In fact, if I wanted to see this movie, I would be picking to see it in 2D, but. Wow, the 3D felt. I think it's because the effects in this film that they're going and trying to harken back to the classic, visceral effects and set designs and tangible effects that the original trilogy had, is what made the 3D work so well in this trailer because it felt even more tangible.
It felt real,
and I think that's why. Oh my God, it made me rethink 3D just a little bit, only a little bit, because you know how much I hate it, but it was good. It was good.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. As far as final thoughts from me, a couple of different things real fast. One, I know that there's a lot of nerds out there, and a lot of people have been harping on this Fantastic Four movie. I'm going to try to go into this as open-minded as possible, because I've really liked the trailers, and I love the cast. And
I love the director, or at least I loved his first film.
Me too. I did as well.
Same.
So, I mean, we don't know exactly what all is true and what isn't true.
And I love the characters. I have more Fantastic Four t-shirts than anyone should. They are my favorite comic book characters of all. So I want this movie to be good.
Sure. So I'm hoping, and I know that they've changed a few things here and there, but it looks great to me. It looks like it could be fun anyway. And I'm hoping for it. So
they also canceled the 3D release of the film, which
release.
I don't know what to make of that. I think a lot of people might think, well, oh, that means they don't have any faith in the movie. That's not necessarily true. Maybe they could have gone over budget and they're just trying to save some money on distributing rights. I don't know. It could be a lot of things, but
a lot of things. Yeah. So I mean, we'll see in a few weeks, but I certainly do look forward to it. And then the last thing, just to echo a lot of the show, if you skipped on Ant-Man this weekend for whatever reason, go watch it. It's so much fun. I promise you'll have a good time, and if not, I'll pay for your movie ticket.
And take some kids with you, because kids will love this movie.
It is very family friendly.
Take my nephew to see this.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it again myself. So, on that note, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Jonathan, for joining us once again. We'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast.
So much fun. I love being on this show.
I know. I could have talked for days on that one, I think.
Right. I'm just glad you gave me my moment to talk about Evangeline Lilly, because yes, I will forever have a sort of crush on Kate.
Yeah.
So
she was awesome in this movie. Absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
For the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.